G'day and welcome to Reality Check Q&A. It's the time of the week where you get the chance to ask me the hard questions. And here to help me is my friend and colleague, Meagan Ourada. G'day, Meagan.
Ross, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm very, very well. What a week. What a turbulent week with all these supposedly shock bombshell revelations from the Wall Street Journal. What a big yawn.
Absolutely a big yawn. We'll start there. You, in our most recent episode, described this article in a few choice words, dim-witted, moronic, blockheaded. Just today, Rep. Anna Paulina Luna, she was recorded. She called it bull you know what. Do you have any new thoughts on the article and the fallout before we get to our first viewer question on it?
Okay, I'm pretty sure that Dr. John Kozlowski, who's the current head of Arrow, has a very independent opinion from that held by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick and Tim Phillips, two immediate people who've been at the helm of the AARO, the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. The gist of the Wall Street Journal article, as everybody probably knows by now, it's part one of a two-part hit job, and essentially it's suggesting what we've always known. This is the crazy thing about this. It's suggesting what we've known for years, that the United States military and intelligence community have been using UFOs as a disinformation cover to conceal stealth programs, things like some of the spy planes and some of the more modern aerospace technology that's currently in development out at the Nevada test range. But the spin on this particular take from Dr. Kirkpatrick and Tim Phillips is that essentially what we're seeing are not alien vehicles, and that this has all been an attempt to conceal from the public the heroic work that the United States is doing in aerospace. Well, I'm here to tell you that yes, the United States does have projects in development, secret aerospace projects in development, but there is not the level of advanced technology to the extent is being clearly suggested by both men. What we are talking about here is retrieved non-human technology. Yes, they do use alien as a disinformation cover, but the simple fact is that does not explain the whole phenomenon. And I think possibly the biggest weakness in the story published by the Wall Street Journal is its glib acceptance of somehow this seems to explain away all of the witness evidence, because by inference, all of the witness evidence is purely and simply that they've been told things about aliens and alien recovered vehicles. What it specifically ignores is the direct first-hand witness evidence. And I don't think it was a coincidence that this story was published pretty much on the dot as Jay Stratton, an extremely highly respected former boss of the UAP task force, was going public in Huntsville at the SCUAP, the Scientific Coalition for the Study of UAPs conference in Huntsville. And essentially what Jay was saying was expanding on what he's already said, that he has directly first-hand witnessed non-human technology. So he's just one of multiple first-hand witnesses who have said publicly that they are prepared to testify to the appropriate authorities about their first-hand knowledge. We've got people like Lou Elizondo, we've got James Lukatsky, you've got Jake Barber. I mean, Jake Barber's evidence is of direct first-hand participation in a UAP craft retrieval program in a secret operation that was coordinated by a US government intelligence agency and a private aerospace company. Now, I know because I've spoken to some of them, there are multiple other people that have given evidence to congressional committees, mainly the Senate and House Armed Services Committee and the Senate and House Intelligence Committees, and also some to the Oversight Committee, the House Oversight Committee, which is the Transparency Committee headed by Anna Paulina Luna. And I was delighted to see that Representative Luna not long ago said that she thought that the claims made by the Wall Street Journal to explain away all non-human technology were nonsense. So I think she might have used a more indiscreet word, which we're not allowed to use on this program, apparently. Everybody keeps on bleating me when I use bad language. But the simple fact is, I think it's an absolute load of cockamamie nonsense. And it's very sad to see the Wall Street Journal being led by the nose by the national security state. It should have shown more skepticism. I'm actually a huge fan of the Wall Street Journal. I've got many friends who've worked there. Really good friend of mine, Tony Horwitz, worked there with Geraldine Brooks years and years ago when the Wall Street Journal was a magnificent newspaper. And it just worries me that what's happened is the national security state has relied upon one of the most august newspapers in America to push a line. One of the other weaknesses, and I've really got to emphasize this, one of the other weaknesses in the Wall Street Journal story that they have failed to respond to is this ridiculous claim that there were electromagnetic pulse tests done at Malmstrom Air Force Base in the time when Captain Bob Salas, Robert Salas, was the commander of a missile silo squadron, if you like, in the US Air Force, and he watched 10 of his missiles be deactivated. According to the Wall Street Journal story, and this is an idea promoted by Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, somehow electromagnetic pulse towers were erected right outside the missile silos and somehow not noticed by anybody, including Captain Salas, and somehow these 60-foot high towers with concrete mountings with thousands of pounds of concrete were used to send an electromagnetic pulse through, believe it or not, 10 thermonuclear missiles. This is utterly ridiculous. I've spoken to people as well as to Robert Salas and also to Mario Woods, another person who's been involved in surveillance of these weapons at missile sites. And they just say it's absolute cockamamie BS to suggest that the United States Air Force would do anything as reckless as to put electromagnetic pulses through thermonuclear missiles without knowing the consequences of putting those pulses through those missiles. So, look, frankly, the reason I say the Wall Street Journal story is a stinking turd is because, frankly, it's utter nonsense. And I don't think the cabal that is controlling this cover-up seriously expects those of us that understand and know what's been going on to believe it. What this is an attempt to try and convince those who have a peripheral understanding of the issue. The sort of members of the public who will read the newspaper and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks very much, move on. And you know what? I don't think that works anymore. This is the problem. As we're showing in this program, there is an extraordinary audience, millions of people. A circulation, I frankly have to admit, is, to my shock, far higher than much of the mainstream media. And the reason why is because you're engaging with us, because you understand that what you're being fed in a lot of the mainstream media is absolute nonsense. And so that's why I say it's moronic and blockheaded what the Wall Street Journal published.
Okay, Ross, thank you. We will get to one question about the article. This came from Mike. He says, hi, Ross. I know the Wall Street Journal article has caused a lot of concerns, but there is one claim in it that should be easy to confirm as true or false. If there was, in fact, a huge EMP device in the mid-1960s used at Malmstrom and Minnow Air Force bases, then where is that device now? Something that useful would be kept around in some secret area. So now that they have announced it existed, no reason to keep it classified. Haul it out and demonstrate it, or tell us who built it. There has to be some top secret design somewhere, or if it's no longer operational, show us the replacement. If you have that technology and you are claiming it to a reporter, then show it. They showed off the U-2 SR-71 stealth bomber. Show us this EMP device. Can you find any evidence that this device actually existed? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence after all.
Yes, Megan, we can find evidence that this device existed. And fascinatingly, this is what we've done. I've worked with a guy called Rob Heatherly and another person who was actually based at Malmstrom Air Force Base as a security officer, Mario Woods. And we've gone through the detail of what the Wall Street Journal asserts. It's fundamentally important to make the point that the Wall Street Journal says that the incident that Captain Bob Salas experienced in March of 1967 involved the use of specific EMP devices. And Joel Shetman, the reporter from the Wall Street Journal who wrote the article, at one stage posted up on Twitter illustrations from the very confidential, formerly confidential documents, now unclassified documents, which show the towers and the devices that were erected to do this electromagnetic pulse work. And he showed these documents originally as evidence to support his story. I'm not quite sure what happened. Some people have told me the documents were taken down from his social media feed when perhaps he realized his mistake. But the documents make it very, very clear that even the concept for this program didn't begin until 2 or 3 months after the March 1967 test. And the actual first construction of these devices, these EMP devices, to do testing on nuclear missile sites didn't begin until 1971. And that's in the very documents that the Wall Street Journal's relying upon to support its assertions in this article that we can't believe Bob Salas because there were these EMP tests being done on nuclear missile sites, supposedly in March of 1967. So I'm sorry for the complication, but it's really important people understand this because this is classic disinformation. This is a very lame attempt by the US military to mislead the public. And the thing I find most disconcerting and very, very disturbing is that if it's true, in the article appears to have the support of the Pentagon's PR woman, Susan Go, or perhaps it's Susan Goff. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name, Susan. But we need to get clarification from the Pentagon's PR woman, who's been very much the spokeswoman on UAPs. She needs to explain whether she does endorse the claims made by the Wall Street Journal, because they are wrong. They are flat wrong. They are an obvious attempt to disinform and mislead the public. And that is a breach of an executive order, Executive Order 12333, that was established by the President in the 1970s, after the shock revelations of the Warren Commission, the Church Commission, where the CIA was caught out doing illegal intelligence operations against US citizens. And there were very strict rules brought in that effectively stop the US military and intelligence community, unless there are extremely good reasons that are authorized, from conducting illegal intelligence operations against the American public, including disinformation operations. So, yes, the EMP story is an absolute nonsense. And you'll see more detail about this in a forthcoming show that may or may not be up online yet, where I interview Rob Heatherly, who's an engineer, and Mario Woods, who's actually worked at one of these bases and knows intimately the setup. Suffice to say, there is no way that the US military, even the US Air Force, in its impetuousness, would allow massive discharges of electricity to be put through thermonuclear missile sites. Remember, these are the most dangerous weapons in the world. The Wall Street Journal is seriously suggesting that the US Air Force would be so irresponsible as to sanction an operation where, without knowing what the consequences would be, they would put a massive electrical discharge through 10 thermonuclear missiles. For all we know, those missiles might very well have been detonated. It could have obliterated parts of that part of central Midwest America. It's utterly ridiculous. And the lameness of the explanation, I think, indicates the increasing desperation of those people in the military industrial areas who are trying to cover this issue up. Give up, guys. We know a hell of a lot more than you realize. People are leaking like a sieve. Save yourselves. Come forward now and reveal what you know, because you are going to be exposed. I have never seen a story leaking so assiduously as this one.
Well said, Ross. And that interview is live. I will make sure to link to it at the in the description box if people want to watch it. But we will move to our next question. This is coming in from Adam. Hi, Ross and Megan. I want to sincerely thank you for your incredible work. Your insights have truly opened my eyes and changed my life, and I'm deeply grateful. Ross, I know you have a passion for revisiting historical UFO events. Given everything we've learned in recent years, have you ever looked into Phil Schneider's 1995 speech about an alleged alien battle in a deep underground base in New Mexico? Considering what we now understand, especially in light of Phil's suspicious death, I can't help but feel concerned that the alien threat may be hostile and merely biding its time. Again, I truly appreciate all the hard work you do, loving both your hard work. Adam from Australia.
G'day, Adam. Nice to talk to you. Yes, I am interested in the Phil Schneider case. I have to admit, like a lot of people, I've watched Phil Schneider. Was it 95 or 96? I thought it was 96. He did an interview. It's very blurry, bad, looks like film or very early video where he's talking at some function. And he describes how he was involved in the construction of what he says was like a 7 level underground facility underneath a mountain at Dulce, New Mexico. Now, I got interested in this story when I was writing my book because I started reading the NIDS, the National Institute of Discovery Science investigations into allegations raised by Native American people, particularly a local police chief in the Native American community, Gabe Valdez, who said that they were seeing all manner of strange things and hearing lots of stories about alleged underground facilities around Dulce, which is obviously a remote part of New Mexico. Gabe has described in his accounts that he and his colleague, when they were searching for whatever was going on, found air vents in what should have been empty mountainsides. And I do believe that there are underground facilities right across the United States that have been built in secret by the United States military, particularly the US Air Force. And we do know that Phil Schneider was an engineer who worked in tunneling. I've been able to verify that aspect of his record. The tragedy with Phil Schneider is, depending on who you believe, he either committed suicide in extremely implausible circumstances or he was murdered. And I've seen the murder photo. I've read the coronial investigation into what happened. It's pretty gruesome and it does strain credibility that Phil Schneider committed suicide in the way that is described. It's too upsetting to describe here. But I'm very interested in the Phil Schneider case. And like a lot of things that I hear, I, I can only speculate. This is not in any way sourced information. I don't know if the Dulce facility in New Mexico is real. I do know that there are underground facilities in New Mexico, and I know the location of at least one of them. I would love to know if there is a facility with 7 levels underneath Dulce, New Mexico. I would love to know if there are maglev trains connecting these facilities, as some people have recently asserted to me. I recently had a conversation with somebody who was working in a tunnelling company who told me that they were privy to a conversation where a member of their company made indiscreet admissions about being involved in the construction of these facilities. I am persuaded, and we know this for a fact now, that there is an underground facility, a hidden underground facility, likely operated by the US Air Force, which is, and essentially operating, I suspect, in collaboration with Lockheed Martin, operating near Sedona in Arizona. I would love to hear more about the Phil Schneider case. It's a tragedy that he died when he did. And certainly, as a journalist, what I need is information. I need people to come forward and feel okay about contacting me. And if you go to my website, rosscoulthart.com, you will see there are all manner of ways of getting in touch with me via encrypted portals that would allow you to upload material in a safe and very secure way.
All right, Ross, let's take a question from a viewer from Arkansas. Hi, Ross and Megan. At a recent disclosure panel at Contact in the Desert, I found it particularly striking that there was broad agreement among the speakers that the UFO phenomenon itself seems to be in control of the pace and nature of disclosure. One especially intriguing idea mentioned was the possibility that certain avatars, potentially operating incognito, might be influencing or managing aspects of this process from within Washington, D.C. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this concept of avatars. Do you see any credible basis for it? And how seriously is it being considered in the circles you report on? Clifford Jones.
Very controversial issue. And simply put, I don't know for sure. But I'll tell you what I keep on coming back to. Slide 9 is a document that was prepared as part of a PowerPoint briefing to an Undersecretary of Defense. From memory, it was a guy called Thomas Modley. And this was a briefing that was done, I think, by Lou Elizondo's team when they were attempting to galvanize the Pentagon to take the UAP seriously, the UAP issue more seriously. In that document, which is a PowerPoint slide, it basically talks about the capacity of the phenomenon, whatever it is, to somehow influence human cognition, perception. The suggestion there is that whatever it is, it has the capacity to manipulate not only remotely mechanical devices, including nuclear missiles. We know that they've taken nuclear missiles offline, and we know from an incident in Russia on one occasion, they actually put a missile one button push from launch, just to scare the living bejabbers out of the Soviets at the time. What's really interesting, though, and I think this is often overlooked and underplayed, is the significance of the fact that slide 9, which Lou and others who were there at the time have resisted expanding upon. I think they were surprised that it leaked from Chris Mellon's files. The document shows a clear contemplation that the phenomenon is able to manipulate human perception. So the simple answer to your question is, if there is a non-human intelligence that is capable of manipulating human perception, can it make us see things that are not real? That's a distinct possibility. So are they able to manipulate how they look? And if that's the case, does that perhaps explain why some people have said they walk among us? If they do walk among us, are they manipulating human perception? I mean, this is a really important point, and I don't think we're now at the point where we can just peremptorily dismiss this kind of stuff. There are allegations on the record in briefing documents to the US Defense Department that the phenomenon can manipulate human perception. Once we accept the veracity of such assertions, anything is possible.
All right, Russ, we have another Australia viewer for you. This is Mick Dwyer. Hi, Ross. I'm from Shell Harbour, New South Wales, Australia. My
Just
question
down the
is,
road.
I'm sorry?
Just down the road from me, not too far at all.
Oh,
Beautiful
all
place there.
right.
I go,
Well,
I
if
go
you and
diving there. Yeah,
you and Mick want to meet up and chat about this, we can record it for your Instagram, right?
sure.
All right, here's his question. Has there been anyone pushing the aerospace companies for comment regarding this topic? I've been following this for years now. However, they seem to be strangely absent from any discourse. Keep doing what you're doing, Ross. Love your work, Mick.
Yes, the answer is yes. When the Lou Elizondo allegations, when the David Grush allegations, and when the Jake Barber allegations were raised, questions were and have been put to aerospace companies, most notably Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman. And you know what's consistent about the way that they respond? They've all referred back any questions about whether there is a covert US non-human technology retrieval program and reverse engineering program. They don't deny it. They don't answer it. They just say, talk to the Pentagon. Now, if you think about it, why would private aerospace companies, if this is all a big cockamamie story, why would they say talk to the Pentagon? Why would they buck pass? One of the reasons why is because as publicly listed companies, they are under a continuing disclosure obligation. They are corporations that are listed on the stock exchange. They cannot say or do anything that materially influences their share price without disclosing it to their shareholders. There are exemptions, I understand, in the laws that would allow them to withhold stuff on the grounds of national security. So what they've done is very clever. I know Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin are involved. They're in it up to their necks. They're the principal companies involved in the legacy program, as well as other companies that we will be naming in due course. But the interesting thing is, rather than just deny it outright and go, oh, what a silly question, a retrieval program of non-human alien technology? Are you guys crazy? Ha ha ha. I'm the PR man for Lockheed Martin and I can happily rebut that. That's completely untrue. No, they don't do that. What they do consistently is they go, oh, you need to talk to the Defence Department about that. Why do they buck pass if it's not true?
All right, Russ, we will go to our next question. We really enjoy your program, and it's great to see and hear about UAPs as we don't get to hear on other programs and nothing on mainstream media. What are your thoughts on deja vu moments? I often wonder, did the deja vu moment happen in another dimension? Keep up the great work. Regards, Teresa and Paul.
Okay, I'm so pleased. Honestly, I did not set this question up. I am so excited to talk to you about this because this is an area I'm in deep down at the moment. Deja vu, intuition, precognition. I think all of this is touching on something that science is only just beginning to start to try to understand. And I spoke a little bit about this at Contact in the Desert. I've long been interested as a journalist. In fact, I was thinking of writing a book about this before I got into the subject of UFOs. I was talking to a lot of sports people and military elite operators as a journalist, and I was struck by how often what they would talk about was flow, that intuitively they do things without even realizing they're doing it. And they're not quite sure where it's coming from, but they almost know what to do before they do it. And they can't explain why. Military operators would tell me that they were clearing a house in Afghanistan, for example, and they just knew that there was a jihadi with a machine gun waiting to kill them on the left-hand side as they went in through the door. They had an intuition about it. They could almost see the person in their mind sitting there, and they dealt differently with clearing that house in order to stop themselves from being hurt or killed. What is that? Is it just deja vu? Is it just a trick of the mind, as some people suggest? Some people have suggested in science that what it is a cognitive delay in our brain signals, and that what we think is some kind of precognition or foresight is merely just a kind of a lapse, a time code delay, if you like, in the brain's messaging. There is an increasing theory about consciousness, about human consciousness, a theory propounded largely in part by Sir Roger Penrose and Dr. Professor Stuart Hameroff. Both of these men have championed an idea, a hypothesis, which is still only a hypothesis, that consciousness is non-local, and that the human brain perhaps has a capacity through its pineal gland to tap into a consciousness outside of the human meat body. And the implications of that are very interesting. There are things called microtubules in the brain that are part of our neurons. And the theory is that those microtubules have the capacity to connect at the quantum level, essentially a type of quantum entanglement. If this is true, this theory, what it would do is explain human intuition, human precognition. And it might explain, and this is what fascinated me when I was a lot younger, the idea of creative downloads, the number of scientists, artists who've had inspirations. Like Paul McCartney, for example, when he wrote Rest Yesterday, one of my favourite songs. Paul McCartney has said many times that he woke up with the lyrics of Yesterday in his head, that he just sat up, wrote the lyrics down, and wrote an absolute best-selling song. Conventional psychology would say that what happened there was he was processing, that his brain was operating in the subconscious level, and that essentially, like a computer, it processed in the background and came out with this idea. But is it possible that what's actually happening when people discover things like the benzene ring, the scientist who discovered the shape of benzene dreamt of a snake eating its tail, a coiled circle. Francis Crick, when he came up with the idea of the double helix for the understanding of the structure of DNA, he came up with the, again, two intertwined coils in his brain and wrote that down and described it in three dimensions and was able, for the first time, to describe a design for DNA that incorporated all of its components in a logical way. If you go through science and creativity, inventions, Time and time again, the people who've had these creative insights acknowledge they had a dream, they had an insight, they had an intuition, they had a deja vu. And I think there's something to this. And I'm actually going to a conference in Spain in a few weeks' time of some of the world's top leaders in the world in consciousness. And we're going to be talking about this. There's actually huge interest at the scientific level in what I'm talking about psionics and psychic behavior being demonstrated in the UAP field, because it's tapping into what science is currently exploring at the edges of its understanding. Perhaps there are new ways of explaining psychic behavior, remote viewing, telepathy, the very things that science currently scoffs at. There might, in fact, be an explanation for what we call deja vu, intuition, or psychic phenomena, psionics.
That's all extremely interesting, Ross. Thank you for that. And we'll go to our last question now. Dear Ross, I'm a huge follower on the subject of UAPs and look to you as a source of truth in these matters. Please, 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 there is one problem that troubles me and is never discussed amongst the UAP community. How and why can a non-human intelligence that may have technology of traveling light years or interdimensionally find gravity such a difficult force to navigate and then crash into Earth? I would love to hear your thoughts on this subject. Surely this matter should be discussed more frequently in the UAP community. Kind regards, Stephen Cunningham.
Well, Stephen, that's a good question. And obviously, it's one of the prime arguments you get from the debunkers as well. They scoff at the idea that an advanced civilization could somehow be so stupid as to come all the way across the universe and then crash accidentally and leave its craft for us to retrieve. That's the assertion that's been made by people to explain supposedly how these incidents have occurred. I don't know if it's actually true. I suspect, for example, that Roswell was a collision between two NHI vehicles, and that's what I've been told. Um, for example, we also know that there are allegations now on the record from people who purport to have been inside the program, including Jake Barber, who's talked about this to me and to Jesse Michaels, the fact that at different times during the time when he was working in the program as someone involved in the retrieval of craft, the United States was and is using what's called HPM weapons, high pulse microwave weapons. And these weapons allegedly distort or in some way interfere with the electrical field, some kind of plasmatic field around these alleged NHI craft, which means that the propulsion system is deactivated and these craft crash. Isn't it terrible to think about that possibility that our first contact with a non-human intelligence, if this is true, may involve us, stupid apes, acting offensively against non-human intelligence? This is what really worries me about what's been going on in our name on behalf of the US government in its bid to supposedly secure some kind of strategic advantage over its foreign adversaries. Maybe we should be thinking more about the morals of what we've been doing and the ethics of how we as humans should be conducting ourselves if this is true. But yes, I don't buy the line that these non-human intelligence beings, if they are so advanced, are just somehow crashing. What I think is happening is there have been accidents. I think it was discovered back in the 1940s that somehow some of the extremely powerful radar that we were using could in fact disrupt the magnetic field around these craft. That's what I've been told. And more importantly, I think also we have been using HPM weapons, high pulse microwave weapons, and I'm told also plasmatic beam weapons that have been in development against these craft.
All right, Ross, thank you. That is it for today.
Thank you very, very much. And if you've got any questions you'd like to direct to me, you can send them to realitycheck@newsnationnow.com. Thanks very much, Meagan.
Thank you, Ross.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.